Call to order this first meeting of the Taxes Working Group. We have on the Senate side we have one member who is in transit right now and may join us later on virtually. Would like to welcome the public. This is a public meeting. Decisions will be made in public. Discussion will happen in public. There likely are, as always, throughout the legislative session, private conversations. They're not out of line, but the work is, and I believe that all the members of this group, both House and Senate, believe in public dialogue, that the citizens and the people of Minnesota that we represent have a right to watch how public policy is developed and debated and adopted. The procedures that we use are going to be the same as the directed by our leaders, as if we actually were a conference committee. So the protocols are being followed, with the exception of today, which would ordinarily the House would call the first conference committee meeting. They invited me, the two chairs on the other side invited me to do that, and I accepted. And after this, each day that we need to meet to come to conclusions, we will switch off like we would do ordinarily. So tomorrow, the House will preside over the meeting, and then again on Thursday, back to the Senate. I don't think all of us who are on this conference committee are familiar with those procedures, and we don't really need to go much further into them. We have, but we will ask the members to identify themselves. You can say anything about yourself that you'd like, or you can just give your name. And I'm Ann Rust, and chair of the Senate Taxes Committee.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Senator Grant Hochschild. I represent the largest and most rural district in the state of Minnesota, including the Iron Range, North Shore, communities surrounding Duluth, and 65% of the Canadian border. Excited to be here, a part of this working group. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hochschild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Bill Weber, Senate District 21. I am the minority lead on the Senate Tax Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is State Senator Scott Dibble, and I represent Senate District 60, which is, 61, which is, what am I now? The numbers always change, 60. So I represent Southwest Minneapolis, a little bit of downtown, a little bit of north, one of the least rural districts in the state.
Representative Davids.
Representative Greg Davids, District 26B, Fillmore, Houston, and part of Mauer County. I represent down to the Iowa border and over the Wisconsin border. So looking forward to these meetings.
Representative Joy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Jim Joy. I represent Clay County and Becker County, and I'm the Vice Chair on taxes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Aisha Gomez. I'm a state representative for District 62A, which is the south side of Minneapolis, and I serve as the DFL co-chair of the House Taxes Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Esther Agbaje, State Representative, House District 59B, which covers parts of North Minneapolis and downtown Minneapolis.
We also have sitting at the table the Commissioner of Revenue, if you'd identify yourself.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm Paul Marquardt, Commissioner of the Department of Revenue, and Chair Rest, Chair Davids, Chair Gomez, thank you so much for allowing the administration to have a seat and a voice at this table and look forward to working on a bill that's good for all of Minnesota. So thank you.
Thank you, and then we'll go back over here and have our staff start by introducing themselves. Mr. Munn.
Madam Chair and members of the working group, my name is Casey Mumm. I'm the fiscal analyst for the Senate.
Madam Chair, members, Eric Sylvia, I'm with Senate Council. I primarily work on property taxes, public finance, tax increment financing, and mining and minerals.
Madam Chair, Nora Pollock, nonpartisan counsel to the Committee for Income and Sales Taxes.
Madam Chair and members, Jared Swanson with House Research. I primarily staff property taxes and mining taxes.
Madam Chair and members, Chris Klayman from House Research, business taxes, estate taxes, and some gross receipts taxes this year.
Madam Chair, members, my name is Katrina Highmark. I'm the House Fiscal Analyst. I cover property taxes, aids, and credits.
Hello, Cynthia Templin, House Fiscal Staff. I'm the other fiscal analyst that staffs mainly income tax, sales tax, and other state taxes.
Thank you very much. We also have some caucus staff that advise us that are sitting behind me. What we intend to do this afternoon is, as indicated on the agenda, from the Senate side, is a walkthrough of the spreadsheet that represents the document in 13 articles that has been distributed to the members. It is in the main, reflects the work that's been done in the Senate Taxes Committee and includes all of Senate File 132 that went to the Senate floor some weeks ago, and then much of the articles, many of the articles with some changes. That also includes the agreement that was reached by the leaders with regard to the revenue and credits that are part of this. And then we had, with the agreement, we had 3 major provisions that the leaders agreed to, one having to do with the R&D credit at $80 million, which is represents some 23% of the R&D credit, making it refundable. Secondly, the elimination, the repeal of the electricity exemption for data centers. And we also have a 50% increase from the leaders on the cannabis tax. We were given a target, and then and that's represented in this document, and it does balance. And the other alternatives we had to reach that target were aid cuts, which will be clear as we go through the document. Otherwise, there are lots of policy initiatives that have come not only from Democrats, but our partner Republicans. And we hope to have an efficient discussion of them. We're also instructed to exchange offers, whether it's on, I mean, we're offering our whole bill, but we can adopt things in part as we go along. And we will go through the spreadsheet, have a high-level summary of the various articles, probably then take a recess for a very short period of time to present our first offer with regard to some of the sections in the bill. As our Senate staff walks through the spreadsheet, if there are questions about anything that is on it, the document, I think, was posted, about an hour and a half or so ago. And I don't think there are any particular surprises in it, but if there are questions, we would welcome them. So I'm going to ask Mr. Munn then if he will, and I think it's easier just to say one word like conferees rather than working group members. So I'm going to ask if any of the conferees have any questions of Mr. Munn, please raise your hand or speak up and we will take them. Mr. Munn.
Madam Chair and conferees, I will try to move expeditiously and only highlight some of the more sizable provisions walking through the spreadsheet. But first I wanted to call your attention to the very top lines. You will see that the budget agreement calls for targets of negative $118 million in fiscal years 26 and 27 and negative $190 million in the fiscal 28 and 29 biennium. That's a four-year total of $308 million. This agreement, or this document meets that target over 4 years, though the biennial amounts are slightly above and below target, and that is because the budget agreement also prohibits the utilization of the June accelerated shift to move revenue between the two biennia. The first thing I would point out on the first page, which summarizes the changes to individual income tax revenue, is on line 15. This reflects the inclusion of the research and development credit at a refundable rate of 23.52%. The amounts shown here are only the effects on the individual income tax. There is a corresponding line on page 2, line 36, showing the much more sizable effect on the corporate franchise tax. On lines 24 through 27 are modifications to the beginning farmer credit. There are modifications to the eligibility of the credit and provision from the budget agreement that repeals the sales tax exemption on electricity used by data centers. It is expected to increase tax revenue by $138.95 million over the next two biennia. The following line is reflects the extension of the sunset for the exemption to the year 2062. There are no effects shown here because that is well outside of the budget window. On line 53 is an increase in the cannabis gross receipts tax from 10% to 15%. This proposal is expected to generate $147.7 million over the next two biennia. Paired with this on line 54 is a repeal of the local government cannabis aid that is currently in law at 20% of the cannabis gross receipts tax revenue is dedicated to that aid. Repealing it would result in $64.6 million of revenue for the general fund. Moving on to page 3, these are the property tax provisions that are contained in the document. These were all contained in the Senate, the second engrossment of the Senate's Omnibus Bill. You can see the amounts shown here. On page 4 are the changes to local government aids. You can see on lines 93 and 94 a $15 million annual reduction in the appropriation for local government aid and county program aid, beginning with aids payable in 2026. On lines 95 and 96 are reductions to local homeless prevention aid and statewide local housing aid, both are being reduced by $5 million a year, beginning with aids payable in 2026. On line 97 is a increase in the fiscal 28-29 biennium of $4.3 million for soil and water conservation district aid. On line 98 is a proposal from Senator Hochschild establishing a school seasonal tax-based replacement aid. The aid appropriation would cost a little over $11 million over 4 years. And on line 99 is a 10% reduction to SFIA payments that would result in a savings of a little over $5.5 million. The provisions, the remaining provisions in the local government aid section were all carried in the Senate's second engrossment. The remaining items on this page are all interactions with the Ag Homestead Market Value Credit, the School Building Bond Agricultural Credit, and there are several other changes that do not have a fiscal effect. And lastly, on page 5, there are a few items of note. Repealing local government cannabis aid, there's a $5 million, just over $5 million transfer to the general fund that is part of that provision. On line 134 is a $5 million revenue to the general fund resulting from repealing the tax modernization account that was enacted in 2023. And on line 135 is cancellation of the remaining balance of $10 million appropriation to the city of Minneapolis that was enacted in the 2023 tax bill. The remaining items here do not have fiscal effects. And on the last, on page 6, there are tax increment financing provisions listed that also do not have a fiscal effect. And pages 7 and 8 show the effect of the various provisions on the non-general funds. And I will not go through those in detail. Madam Chair, conferees, that's the spreadsheet.
Thank you. Are there questions or inquiries of Mr. Munn? Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just kind of going to go, I have a couple comments, but a few questions. So just want to note that on line 15 on the first page is the R&D credit with refundability as how you get to the 20 million, or I guess it's in two places. The big one is on line 36, excuse me. So it speaks to refundability. I just want to note for everybody that what came from leadership was an agreement on an amount, on an annual amount. It was silent on the policy questions of how you get there. So I appreciate the Senate's position, but I just wanted to point that out for people. Although the amount is agreed to by leadership, the design of how you get to the amount was not agreed to at leadership table. So the question that I have is about the cuts to aids, which are on line 93 through 96. And so on line 93 is the LGA reduction, which is $15 million a year. On line 94 is the CPA, the county program aid reduction. Also $15 million a year goes to every single county in the state. Those are general purpose aids. And so they are designed as substitutes. You know, they're an acknowledgement that the functions that local governments do often fall onto the property taxpayer. And so the idea here is that as the state, we say that we understand that you know, putting everything on property taxes is an incredibly just inequitable way to fund local government. And so that's the purpose of these aids, and I want that to be clear. My question about them, additionally, on lines 95 and 96, you make new cuts to local homeless prevention aid and to statewide local housing aid. As you can tell from those descriptions, those are for homelessness and for housing. Critical issues across our state. The local homeless prevention aid in particular goes to counties. It goes to all 87 counties. And, you know, those local governments are doing incredible things with them. Now, we've seen, of course, a few versions now of this bill that all have these cuts to local aids. And I thought it was really important that we had runs for each of these, both for those cuts to local governments, 93, 94, 95, and 96, and also the establishment of a brand new aid on line 98 in the amount of $3.4 million in the first biennium, or excuse me, 3.4 in the first biennium, 7.6 million. So this is a brand new aid. We're cutting the aids that go to everybody. And we have brand new aid that goes just to certain parts of the state. And I was pleased, and it was very important for my members, and I believe for the public, to understand what the impacts of these cuts to aids to local governments were. And we had runs of all of these things. So we had runs of the cuts to LGA and CPA, a list of how much each of our cities and counties will be cut under this bill, and I didn't see those. And so that's what I'm interested in is can we anticipate that runs for these 4 items in particular, or I guess there's 6 items, so lines 93 through 98, those all are formula-based, and so it's not evident to people in the public or to policymakers what the cuts will be to each city and county across our state. And I think that's really important for us to be able to make informed decisions. So I'm just wondering if or when we can expect that there will be runs for these cuts posted on the page. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Gomez. If it wasn't there, we certainly intended to have the notice that other than the spreadsheet and the language, that the charts about the charts and the runs are going to be posted as soon as they are available. There were, with some of them, there were minor changes, and to be accurate, we did not post inaccurate documents, but as soon as they are available, and maybe even later today, but if not, certainly tomorrow. So appreciate that question and pointing that out to the members and the public. With regard to the first comment you made about the research and development credit refundability, the amount that is in the agreement specifically says $80 million. It did not say they did not say a percentage, and so we took that literally, and $80 million divided between the individual refundable rate, individuals refundable credit, and the corporate one. If you add, when you add those together, it's $80 million. The cuts in the aids were what the agreement demanded of us, and that's what we did. And I wish they were not necessary. We had the opportunity to have raised revenue from a single source. The social media providers tax, not one single Minnesotan would have paid a dime of that tax, but we do have the cannabis tax. We have loss to Minnesota businesses of millions of dollars in their legitimate businesses here, not only cannabis dispensaries, liquor stores that have THC drinks and so forth, and but we could not, I guess we could have tried to work around that, but it was pretty clear that we had very huge restrictions on what we could do and what we could not do. So that's what this document represents. I don't like the places where the tax increases were given to us. I don't. I wish the aid cuts were not a fact of life in the economy that we have before us, facing, depending on which side of the aisle you talk to, a $5 billion or a $3 billion or a $6 billion deficit. The agreement takes us to 45% of, the governor wanted 50% in terms of what's left to make up in the out biennium. The House came in to start with at 2%. So that was a long and difficult decision to even reach that point. The credit that you reference, I'm going to ask Senator Housechild if he would talk about the seasonal rec thing, which you took particular aim at. Senator Housechild.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Gomez. There was a decision made in 2000 and 2001 under first the Ventura administration and later in the Pawlenty administration, whereby they took seasonal recreation property taxes for operating levies for schools, and they sent it to the general fund first to be used generally for all education, and then later to just send to the general fund to plug a budget hole. This was a huge disservice. I've talked about this ad nauseum for those that have been following, but this is a huge disservice to those school districts that have a high proportion of seasonal recreation property. Some of my school districts have up to 50% of their properties that are part-time homeowners. And these are some of the wealthiest, largest homes on the best pieces of land on lake property in our communities. And those homes under the provision that was passed in 2001, do not pay into the local operating levies for schools in northern Minnesota, in central Minnesota, and in other parts of our state. So it's a huge equity issue for me when our rural schools are cutting staff, losing per pupil students in our schools, cutting counselors, teachers, and having to consolidate their schools, having many students travel, hundreds of miles to get to school. So what we're trying to do with this is not necessarily change the provision that was made in 2001 in terms of the taxation of those seasonal properties, but what we're saying is we need to make up for this. We need to make sure that the wealthiest in our communities actually do help pay for some of the local schools where they reside. If you're able to afford a second or third home in some of the most beautiful parts of Minnesota, then you should pay for the local schools in those communities. That is the point of this aid, and that is why it is so critical for communities like mine and many others. And so I think it's really about an equity issue. It's about sort of rectifying the change that was made in 2001, and I'm really hopeful that we can get the job done this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Houschild. Any other, just a moment. I'm going to ask for any other questions, but I wonder if anyone else on our side wants to respond to the points that were raised by Representative Gomez, or shall we go back to other questions? Anything? Okay. Representative Gomez.
Thank you. And I appreciate the context for the seasonal recreational, I don't remember what it's called exactly, school seasonal tax-based replacement aid. And what you said, the wealthiest in our communities should pay for the schools that are near them. And that was the decision that was made in 2001, was that they would no longer pay into local school levies. But that's not what this is. That's not what we see in front of us. If you believe that, those people who own those fancy lake houses should pay into your local levies, why isn't that the proposal? Instead, what we have is not those wealthy cabin owners. They aren't going to pay this. Who's going to pay this? The rest of the state, who's having all of their general purpose aid cut. What happens when you cut a general purpose aid to a city or a county that's using that general purpose aid to pay for basic city and county services? What happens when that's reduced? Property taxes go up. That is the way that local governments have to pay for the public goods that they provide their residents. And so what this is literally doing, look at the spreadsheet. It's taking from the entire state and giving to one part of it. This is not a proposal to ask the wealthy cabin owners of northern Minnesota to pay for their local schools. If it was, you'd have my support 100%. Instead, it cuts from every one of our local governments. That's like the balancing that you see here. And we also heard that aid cuts are a fact of life. Absolutely untrue. Aid cuts are a choice. Aid cuts are a choice. LGA and CPA cuts are a choice. And I'm really distressed to see that choice reflected in this bill. Because you talk about an inequitable system, and I agree with you, Senator Houschild, like that those cabin owners up on the lakes, they should pay into the local school levies. So let's make them do it. That's not what this is. That's not what this is. This is taking from the whole to send money to a specific part of the state. And whether it's yours or it's mine, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's the proper response to what I agree is an inequitable situation with funding of your local public schools. It's not to spread the inequity further. The answer is to have the cabin owners pay into the local levies. So I hope that we could do that instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gomez. The solution that you would propose is unconstitutional. It reflects taxation without representation. Those Minnesotans who have those second properties are paying the school taxes in their own districts, and there was a decision to make them, those properties, the seasonal rec properties, their taxes go into the statewide property tax system. It was to be totally devoted to education in the 2001 bill, and shortly after, when Tim Pawlenty was elected, he repealed that and sent the money to the general fund. So that is, I think, a very strong principle that we don't allow people to vote in two different jurisdictions in Minnesota, and that is how that came about. At this time, I think what Senator Hauschild is proposing is a way of, it's kind of a workaround. I don't consider it a loophole, but it's a workaround of how some of those dollars that would go, have gone into the general fund from the statewide property tax are going to be held aside for the contributing to this, the school districts based on a formula and strongly supported, by the way, by the education lobby, that we are trying to do in a, I think, kind of simple way, but certainly accept your criticism that you don't like it, that those districts throughout the state that because those revenues are not available to them have a very difficult time offering the opportunity to their voters to pass a referendum. So the solution that you might like of taxing those, putting those taxes on the on those properties, as well as requiring them to pay the school taxes in their own districts is just not available. So, Senator Hauschild.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Gomez. In addition to everything that Chair Rest said, which I concur with, I would just point out that, for example, local government aid, 66% of local government aid goes to Greater Minnesota. So when we're talking about cuts across the state, many of these cuts from LGA and CPA are disproportionately already coming from Greater Minnesota. Greater Minnesota, where there are communities that have far less wealth than many of the communities in the Twin Cities, if not all of them, right? For example, I represent the Aurora-Hoyt Lakes area. I represent Hoyt Lakes bordered with Aurora, the poorest community per capita in the state. These are the communities, these are the school districts that would benefit not from state money, I would argue, but from the very residents who live in their communities and chose to take the highest valued properties in their area. So while I understand, your point about let's just tax them directly, I think Chair Rest made the point that that would be unconstitutional. So let's find a way to take the money that those very property tax owners are paying into the general fund, create an aid that pays back 50% of that capacity back to those local school districts if, and again, this is the important piece, if those local communities actually vote to do so. So we're making it so that the local property owners who have less valued properties also make sure that those with the wealthier properties are paying in an aid towards those local school districts. I think it's very common sense. I think it's an equity issue that we need to solve. And I think the other aid cuts that we're making have some disproportionate impact on greater Minnesota. So that's why we're trying to solve one issue among many others. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Munn informs us that he has received the runs, and I wonder if you would explain which runs have you received just now or within the last 10 minutes, and they're going to be posted.
Madam Chair and members, they are posted. Mr. Berggren recently did that. There are runs for the LGA appropriation, the county program aid appropriation, and the seasonal school-based replacement aid appropriation.
So they, so you can check those out. Are there other questions about the spreadsheet? One thing that always comes up that troubles me about when we both increase aids to local governments and decrease them. Why is it always equal between the cities and the counties? And the counties, I think, make a very legitimate argument that, they are, in a sense, an arm of state government, lots of mandates on them for the services that they have to provide that are not there. Those kinds of obligations are not there for the cities. But as I consider greater Minnesota and LGA, in greater Minnesota, smaller cities, and this is just something that I'm remembering, so I don't have that kind of run in front of me, but for some cities, as much as 30%, 40% of their budgets are supported by the general purpose aid that is served by LGA. And then there are other aids, on the other hand, that go directly to counties that don't go to the cities, and those, unfortunately, some of those are cut here as well. You're right that these Senator Representative Gomez's criticism about them being that these are choices. Every single item in this budget, in my opinion, represents a difficult choice where there are cuts made or increases in revenue that the four leaders, excluding, of course, with apologies to Senator Weber here, excluding the agreement being signed by the Senate Republican leader. But this is the document, this is the agreement that we're working under, and we do not have the option, we do not have the choice to raise taxes. We can only do these three items plus aid cuts, and that's where we have gone here. Any other questions about the spreadsheet? Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just do want to, I'm obviously not a constitutional lawyer. I don't believe either of you are either, but I just want to go back to this question because I think it's important just to understand. So you're saying that the treatment of seasonal recreational property prior to 2001, like this change did not happen because of a court case. It didn't happen because it was deemed to be unconstitutional, is my understanding. Senator Housechild kind of walked us through what the rationale was for it at the time. So, I mean, it's weird to me to assert that the treatment of these properties prior to 2001 was unconstitutional and just assert it as fact. I'm wondering, I'm just trying to, is it okay, could I ask nonpartisan staff a quick question, Madam Chair?
Sure.
Yeah, so just on property tax, I'm just wondering, so commercial properties, commercial industrial properties, which are subject, of course, to the state general levy, do those commercial industrial properties also pay into school referenda? I guess that's the question.
Madam Chair and Representative Gomez, yes, if you owned a commercial or industrial property within a school district that had one of these referendum levies, you would still pay that levy even if you didn't reside in that district.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Swanson. So to me, that is not, a commercial industrial property, which pays into the state general levy, is also pays into local education referenda. And so I'm not sure, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I just want to, I'm going to be asking some follow-up questions about that because I think it's an interesting question. And I just want to confirm that, if the assertion is that, putting seasonal rec property, making that a part of local levies again would be unconstitutional. I just wonder about the difference, but we'll have more discussion about this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think also part of the discussions in the late 90s and the early 2000s was, and maybe that definition has changed, but corporations and business properties are not voters as such. They are not. Now we think of a corporation because of Supreme Court decisions as somehow having an individual right, but certainly not then. And so there were lengthy debates about a taxation without representation of making the Minnesota cabin owners pay twice. I don't believe that that argument is the same for a Walmart someplace. They don't vote, and they're not allowed to vote their property, and that that was not going to happen, and the proposals in 2001 were designed to address that. Again, if it hadn't been overturned less than a year and a half later, we might not have some of the same issues that we have in funding our schools that we have now. So again, I certainly we can go back and talk about at some point, maybe not right now, because I would like to go ahead to the language that's in our bill, but why that difficult choice about CPA and LGA was made in this bill. We did not have those amounts when we had more opportunity in the Senate bill to come up with a taxing mechanism that, again, would not have taxed any single Minnesotan and would have taxed the rich billionaires who make billions of dollars, paying at a lesser rate over the years on their federal taxes, and And we said no to that. We said, let's tax, or the agreement says, let's tax Minnesotans, whether they're businesses or individuals. Let's tax them. And so we have those restrictions, and we have the document before us that we have. We're certainly interested in seeing the documents and the way in which the House is going to propose meeting the restrictions of the agreement. Anything else right now, or can we go to the language? Okay. Our council is going to give pretty much a high-level review of each of the articles, pointing out specifically where the terms of the agreement are dictating what we to be to the our language is accurate language reflecting that. Ms. Pollack, do you want to begin?
Madam Chair and members, I'll start with Article 1, the income and corporate franchise tax article. Off the top, I will say that this article includes the provision providing for refundability of the research and development credit at 23.52%, and includes a related provision requiring a report on the economic impact of the credit by the commissioner to legislative committees with jurisdiction over taxes.
Could you, members do have the document in front of us. Could you, if you have it right before you, if you could say what section that is, if somebody wants to go and look at the actual language, please.
I will do my best, Madam
Thank you.
Chair. Madam Chair, the R&D refundability credit provisions start in section 15, starting on 17.19 of the income and corporate franchise article.
Thank you.
And it goes through sections 16 and 17. And then the report is in section 26 on page 28, line 20.
Any questions about the language in the Article 1 reflecting the agreement? Okay.
Madam Chair, Article 1 also includes changes to the political contribution refund, changes to definitions in the beginning farmer and owner of agricultural assets credits, including a lifting on the allocation cap for the credit. It includes various subtractions, removing assignability of the K-12 credit refund, extension of the PTE tax, modifying short-line railroad credit transfer provisions, nonconformity to worker misclassification rules, and a special provision for corrections to retirement, a special provision for corrections for contributions to retirement accounts.
Okay. Mr. Sylvia.
Madam Chair and members, Article 2 is the property tax article. And within this article, there are a number of sections concerning property tax exemptions. There is a modification of the current law property tax exemption that's expanded for purposes of grazing activities, and also certain airport property is exempt. There are 3 individual exemptions for certain tribal-owned property, and an extension for a property tax exemption for land held by the Port Authority of the City of Bloomington. Within this article are the sections related to the attachments and appurtenances that has been before both bodies for the last few years. There are several provisions relating to agriculture. The first one would be to expand the number of allowable shareholders for entity-owned agricultural property, expanding the list of qualified relatives for purposes of unoccupied special agricultural homestead, the expansion to the definition of an agricultural product to include floriculture, and also to allow market farms, those being less than 15 acres, to qualify, provided that they demonstrate a income capacity of at least $20,000. Within this article is a modification to the class rate for Class 1C homestead resorts, and also modification to Class 2C managed forest land to allow for land held with a conservation easement. The disabled veterans homestead market value exclusion amounts are also expanded. There is authorization for land bank abatements for Class 4D1 low-income housing rental properties to use income averaging. And lastly, there are several changes to the border city program, policy changes only. Those would allow the cities to designate the entire city rather than just a portion of the city as a zone, and also would remove current law restrictions that are in place now so that certain businesses can now become eligible for the tax incentives within the program.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, moving to Article 3, the sales and use and local sales and use taxes article. The provision that removes electricity purchased by data centers is on line 63.27 and 63.28. And then the rest of this article includes adding a definition of large-scale data centers and imposing certain requirements, including prevailing wage and green energy for those large-scale data centers. It provides a sales tax exemption for admission to PGA events and related events, and modifies the definition of metropolitan area for purposes of the regional transportation sales tax and the metro region sales tax, and it modifies requirements for the Hermantown and St. Paul local sales taxes.
Madam Chair and conferees, Article 4 is the property tax aids article. Sections 1, 2, and 16 implement the school district seasonal tax base replacement aid. Sections 3 and 4 establish a local government aid sparsity adjustment that would affect an estimated 15 cities with aids payable in 2026. Section 5 modifies the calculation of the town aid formula to allow the entirety of the appropriation to be utilized. Sections 6 and 13 effectuate the $15 million reduction to the local government aid appropriation. Sections 7 and 14 implement the $15 million reduction to the county program aid appropriation. Section 8 increases the fiscal, or the Soil and Water Conservation District aid appropriation for aids payable in 2027 and thereafter. Sections 9 and 10 reduce the local homeless prevention aid appropriation and make a corresponding change to the amount transferred to the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. Section 11 reduces the statewide local housing aid appropriation. Section 12 requires a report for recipients of the public safety aid that was enacted and distributed in 2023. And Section 15 provides aid penalty forgiveness for 4 cities that did not complete the required annual financial reporting to the state auditor. And that is the AIDS article.
Madam Chair, Article 5 is the local sales tax reform article, and this is the same as appeared in Senate File 2374, the second engrossment. It provides for local governments to enact a local sales tax if their projects meet certain definitional requirements as specified in the article.
Madam Chair, Article 6 is the tax increment financing article. Within this article, there is one general law change, and that relates to clarification to the law enacted in 2021 that authorized the transfer of unobligated increment. This language was a clarification sought by the Office of the State Auditor. The remaining sections within this article are all special laws that are city-specific. I'll just note that they're for the city of Ramsey, Maplewood, Maple Grove, St. Paul, Bloomington, Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, Eden Prairie, Edina, Marshall, Minnetonka, Moorhead, Oakdale, Plymouth, and St. Cloud. And I believe that some of these sections are identical to what had passed the House Tax Committee, and those that are not identical are very similar the last time I reviewed those. And the next article, Madam Chair, in conferees is the public finance article. I will note again that this article, I believe, is identical to that which the House passed to the floor, with the exception of one additional section that is contained within the Senate article, and that is within the grouping of sections that shorten the duration or the period by which notice of a public hearing must be published in a county newspaper. The one additional section the Senate has relates to the notice for property tax abatements. It would be consistent with all other sections, so that notice would be made at least 10 days before the hearing for the consideration of a property tax abatement.
Madam Chair, Article 8 is the Sustainable Aviation Fuel article. It is the same as appeared in Senate File 2374, the second engrossment. It provides for some definitional changes of sustainable aviation fuel and an enhanced credit for certain types of sustainable aviation fuel, and it provides for an extension, an increase to the credit allocation.
Madam Chair, Article 9 is the taxation of gas production article. Within this article, there are several changes relating to incorporating gas within existing mining tax statutes. This article also establishes helium relief areas. Those are defined as areas within the boundaries of a school district that has a boundary within 17 miles of a well, mine structure, or building used for gas production. This article establishes a helium homestead property tax credit, makes changes to sales tax exemptions. It sets a gross proceeds tax rate for carbon dioxide products, helium products, and hydrogen products. It provides distribution of those gross proceeds revenues to school districts, counties, cities, and to the property tax relief account used for the helium homestead property tax credit. And it lastly provides an allocation of the occupation tax revenue from the gas generated within this authorization. And that concludes Article 9, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair and conferees, Article 10 is the miscellaneous article. I'll note that this article includes the increase of the cannabis gross receipts tax from 10 to 15% and the cancellation of the local cannabis aid account. This article also modifies provisions governing the Tax Expenditure Review Commission and includes additional provisions regarding tax expenditures. It establishes a consumer protection restitution account. It adds references to qualified large-scale data centers to various energy-related requirements. It makes modifications and provides for an extension of the Hennepin County ballpark tax. It makes modifications to the e-bike rebate program and modifications to the Sustainable Forest Incentive Act program. It includes a repeal of the controlled substances tax, establishes a revenue ruling program, and includes cancellation of the Minneapolis grant account. Madam Chair, that concludes the miscellaneous article, and then Articles 11 through 13 are the department's policy and technical provision articles, and they are the same as appeared in Senate File 2374, the second engrossment.
Thank you, staff, appreciate that. Excuse me. Are there questions about the language of the provisions that need clarification, or, and certainly can make comments? And when that finishes, we will take a recess, in the House and the Senate is prepared within that recess to then make an offer on some of the subjects that are in front of us. Questions? Go ahead, Senator, Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the language just reminded me of something that I wanted to point out when we were going through the spreadsheet. You referred in your opening comments to the leadership agreement about off-spreadsheet changes to spending or revenue. And that was, the reason that you supplied for, there being no June acceleration in this, those kind of shifts. And so I just would point out to conferees that the item on line 48, which is the data centers exemption sunset extension from the current date of 2042 to 2062, adding 20 years to that sales tax exemption, which costs, it's getting hundreds of millions of dollars a year. $212 million a year was the cost of the entire exemption for the kind of latest, most updated info. And so this line 48 also violates that agreement about off-spreadsheet spending. And so I just would point that out to conferees. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Gomez. I'm going to ask, this was what the separate statement meant about a policy that was adopted, meant about going outside of the 4-year period. We had lengthy conversations about whether and what was, and this is with the special interest groups and with our fiscal staff, of what that restriction meant, what we were able to do and what we were not able to do. The result was we could not take on the June accelerated beyond the 4 years here. We were very disappointed at that because that was one of the sources of revenue, that one-time revenue, because it just goes back and forth. And so we were not allowed to do that. We were allowed and worked with the interests that represented data centers, and with representatives of labor, with representatives of the utilities to address the impact of the loss of the or the repeal of the sales tax exemption on electricity. There were 3 other items that have the sales tax exemption in data centers, and they were left alone. This is the one that was chosen. But Mr. Munn, could you just explain once again why one was permitted and the other was allowed And I don't know if that's exactly the right terms to use, but that's how I at least understand them. Thank you.
Madam Chair, conferees, my understanding of the budget agreement and the advice that I've provided to the chair is that there is a general prohibition against increased state costs that would occur outside of the budget horizon. However, with data centers in particular, there was a superseding condition that the repeal of the exemption on electricity would be paired with consideration of removing or extending the sunset on the overall exemption.
There you go. Representative Gomez.
Madam Chair, if that appears somewhere, please send it to me. I have confirmed this repeatedly with my leadership, who was in the room negotiating the deal. The leadership deal was silent on any data center issue except for the electricity repeal. What it says is that any change to the sunset is to be negotiated in a conference committee. That's what the leadership agreement says. There was no agreement about a sunset. And I'll just read you the rules, the guidelines that we were given. Leaders agree that budget, bonding, and tax bills will avoid growth in state commitments outside of the 4-year targets unless a specific item is mutually agreed upon by those leaders. This item does not meet that requirement. Extending a tax giveaway that constitutes hundreds of millions of dollars a year off spreadsheet, whether it's in 5 years or 25 years, is a violation of the leadership agreement, any way you slice it. This is getting rid of an existing sunset and pushing it out 20 years. That constitutes an off-spreadsheet cost to the people of Minnesota, and it's in violation of the leadership agreement. And it is absolutely not, the House DFL does not agree with the assertion that there was some inclusion of a requirement that we change, extend, or get rid of the 2042 sunset for the data center sales tax exemption as a condition for the deal that was struck. I understand very well that the interest groups that want to see this giant tax giveaway to corporations continue are very upset and are very insistent that they need to get this sunset change. But the rules are written out for us. This constitutes a state obligation to these corporations outside of the budget window, and it is against the rules.
Representative Gomez, that was my understanding until a separate statement that was agreed to by the leaders was actually read to me. They adopted it, they did not sign it, and they did not release it publicly. But our chief fiscal analyst verified the interpretation that Mr. Mung gave me, and so in a subsequent, iteration of this, of our presentation here, it was confirmed. And I would, believe that what is represented here is well within the leadership agreement. And so that's why it's here. We're not out to violate the leadership agreement at all. We're very committed to it. And again, our understanding, based on the information and judgment of the of our fiscal analysts, including our chief fiscal analyst, is that what is represented in this proposal as a bill is permitted. You may not, I mean, I can understand their arguments about allowing it, but it does not violate the leadership agreement. Any other questions about the language? Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I must agree with you on this issue in that it says sunset extension or elimination subject to negotiation within the conference committee. So they are subject to the negotiations, and my caucus very much believes that we are to come up with some language to do that. So I'm scaring myself agreeing with the Senate, but
You should.
that's the way it goes.
Yep. And so, the argument can be that we shouldn't do this, but the notion that we can't do it is just not the case. Anybody else have a question or comment? Okay, we're going to now take a recess. It's 4:30. We'll be back at 5 o'clock. Committee's in recess. Call the working group back to order. We just distributed our Senate offer number 1. It does not include every provision, and particularly we're looking for listening to the comments and questions. Before we wanted to do that, we looked for those items that we felt are pretty uncontroversial or non-controversial, or in some instances, same or similar to provisions that were in the House bill that went to the floor but was never voted on. So I'll just describe them, and we included all four of the, or three of the items in the agreement. We did not address the fourth item, which was aid cuts, and we did not address the issue of it, because that's in dispute of, or not to us, but I understand there's further discussion going on as to what the actual agreement is with regard to the extension of the data center's exemptions other than electricity, which is repealed. So in Senate Article 1, we are proposing sections 15 to 17 and 26. Everybody has the language of in front of them, if you want to look it up. Sections, and that is the proposal coming on the $80 million there. We did put also in the report, which had been part of the governor's proposal to start with. We did not include from that bill, we did not include the purpose language, and it wasn't in our bill to start with. Sections 20 and 21, the short line railroad credit transferability retroactive to tax year 2024. We've been trying to get that right for the last 3 years, and hope this time it happens. We think we can make a decision tonight on Section 6 and 27, which is the repeal of the K-12 credit fund assignability. In Article 2, which is property taxes, we include Section 1, which is the property tax exemption for grazing and certain airport property. That's airport property in Duluth. Another provisions that we have been trying to solve for many years is back in our offer here, and that's Sections 2, 13, and 14, dealing with attachments and appurtenances. We also have Sections 3 to 5, which deals with tribal-owned property tax exemptions. Sections 7 and 8 allow for ag shareholder increase. That's going from the 12 to 18, Senator Anderson's bill, and the ag homestead qualified relative, which is that the relative expansion. And Sections 11 and 12 is the Class 2C managed forest land, and Class 2 adding floriculture and making statements about the policy on market farming. Sections 17 and 20 are restricting, lifting the restrictions on border cities, but there's no appropriation there. Sections 21 to 24 deals with land bank abatement, and Section 25 is the property tax exemption extension for the city of Bloomington. In Senate Article 3, sales and use, we have removed then in Section 2 electricity from the data centers exemption only. That's lines 63.27 and 63.28. In Senate Article 4, the property tax aids, we did modify in our bill, in fairness, the town aid formula modification that previously is not allowed the 10 million for town aid to be fully, the formula prevented in some instances the amount of aid, that 10 million, to be distributed. We also have the aid penalty forgiveness for the cities of Stewart, Alpha, that, and Stewart's been around for a couple of years too, Alpha, Odin, and Trotsky. The one will gain a cost if we don't do it this year. Our Senate Article 7, the public finance in its entirety. The Article 9, taxation of gas production, that's a helium article in its entirety. And in Senate Article 10, which is our miscellaneous article, the third leg of the agreement in terms of tax increases, gross receipts tax increase to 15%, that's Section 34. Accompanying that, the Sections 35, 51, and 58, Paragraph B, which is a repeal of local cannabis aid account. Sections 1 to 7 and 27, which are the Turk modifications that we've been trying to do also for a year or so. And then the Sections 50 and 58, Paragraphs B and D, which is the repeal of the controlled substance tax. And then all in their entirety, sections, Senate Articles 11 through 13, the DOR policy and technical provisions. I understand that the House posted an offer I have, and on purpose did not look at it yet. This offer is in no way, since I refuse to look at it, as a matter of fact, since I said we were going to be making the offer. This offer is in no way a response to anything that the House has put forward. However, certainly, then we also distributed to you at your request. When we got them during our first session, the aid runs and so forth. So that is ours, and we can, since yours is in writing, I understand, if you have copies of it to share with us, that would be great, and we can take a look at that, and if you want to explain it or just describe it, and then we'll take another recess to consider it. I don't know who's going to do that over there. Go right ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So we have a spreadsheet that's being passed out to everybody at the table right now that is sort of the equivalent of what we spent the beginning part of our time together this afternoon going over from the Senate perspective. So it's a bill that meets the spending targets. It is not an offer like your sheet. So I would ask us to do just a brief kind of equivalent walkthrough of our spreadsheet that's being passed out.
Excuse me, just for a minute. So do you have, you say it's a bill? Do we have the language that supports the spreadsheet?
We do not. We have a spreadsheet that meets the, we have a spreadsheet that meets the global targets.
But you don't have the language to go with
It's not ready.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
It's okay if our staff
Yeah, go ahead.
goes
I was just
over.
asking a question where the
Okay.
language of this bill is.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, and conferees, you should have the House spreadsheet before you dated May 20th at 2:34 p.m. And I just want to call the conferee's attention to line 6, which shows that the House position meets the target of saving $118 million in fiscal 26 and 27, and $190 million in fiscal 28 and 29 to the general fund. Turning the page, on page 2, this part of the spreadsheet pertains to state taxes, and positives on this spreadsheet are revenue gains, and negatives are revenue reductions. I just want to remind the conferees of that for this spreadsheet. Starting on page 2, starting at on line 9, are the individual income tax provisions, and one of the changes on this spreadsheet is just an interaction change with AIS on line 16. I should also note on line 11, there's the repeal of the K-12 education credit assignment, and today in the Senate's offer, they also included this provision. Moving down the spreadsheet, corporate franchise tax, the one change from the House position relative to how the bill passed out of Ways and Means is the addition of the R&D tax credit. Right now, there is a placeholder in there of $20 million, a revenue reduction to the general fund each year for the 4 years in the 2 biennia of the budget window. The method of how the R&D credit would be implemented is to be determined. I should also note that there's impact to also the individual income tax, but right now that estimate, when a method is identified for the R&D credit, obviously the revenue impact will be reflected in both income tax and corporate franchise tax. Moving down the spreadsheet on line 23, starting with sales taxes, the one change, again, relative to the bill as it passed out of Ways and Means is on line 30, and this is the data centers repeal electricity exemption. This is estimated to raise $56.250 million in 26 and 27 and $82.7 million. And this is to the general fund. And right now, this is effective July 1, 2025, and there is no change to the sunset date. Moving down the spreadsheet on page 3, I will talk about lines 37 and lines 42 together, cigarette and tobacco products, along with liquor and wine, beer and tax products. The House's position has increased for June acceleration. The increase, you see placeholder amounts on line 39 and 40 for the additional amount of revenue that will be raised with June acceleration, and that percentage amount will be identified in language. Moving down this spreadsheet, there is also on line 48, under the cannabis gross receipts tax, there is a rate increase, and this is also, again, part of the leadership agreement. The rate increase from 10% to 15%. There is an estimated revenue gain of $51 million in 26 and 27 and $91.7 million in the tails. And my colleague, Mr. Mum, also mentioned these same estimates. And moving down the spreadsheet, there is on line 53, or I should mention on line 52, that's the repeal illegal cannabis and controlled substance provision that is the same as how it passed out of the House floor, but I'll just mention that that was also included in the Senate offer that we just heard. On line 53, the solid waste management tax, the allocation to SCORE grants, that has increased relative to how the House bill as it passed Ways and Means. That has increased to an amount of $604,000 in fiscal 26 and 27, and $1.28 million in fiscal 28 and 29. And that concludes the state taxes portion of the spreadsheet.
Madam Chair and members, for the record, my name is Katrina Highmark, House Fiscal Analysis. Bring your attention to page 4. This is the portion of the spreadsheet that deals with property taxes, aids, and credits. The general fund impact. As a note, positive numbers on this portion of the spreadsheet represent expenditures, and negative numbers represent cost savings. On page 4, the provisions that you see listed within the House position are the same as in the version of the House tax bill that was passed out of Ways and Means. So I will bring your attention to the items that have changed on page 5. Moving to page 5, on line 40, there is an increase to the cut for SFIA payments. In the original offer, the cut was $6 million in fiscal 28 and 29, and this is increased to $8.6 million in fiscal 28 and 29. Lines 46 and 47 are new items. This is a reduction to the aquatic invasive species prevention aid of $5.88 million in fiscal 28 and 29, which also has income tax and property tax interactions. Moving to line 51, this is a reduction of soil water conservation district aid of $4 million in fiscal 28 and 29. This is a new provision. Moving down to line 64, the transfer out for the tax filing modernization account was present in the previous version of the House tax bill. However, that was in fiscal 28 and 29. This transfer out has been moved to fiscal 26, and so the total impact in fiscal 26 and 27 is $2.397 million. Lines 66 and 67 are a reduction in the amount of the grants for the taxpayer assistance grants and the tax credit outreach grants from the original House position. The reduction is the total amount for these grants is $250,000 starting in fiscal 2029 for both the assistance and outreach grants. And line 70 is a new provision. This is a one-time cancellation of the base appropriation for cannabis administration from the Department of Revenue, and that would total $3.87 million in fiscal 2025. And the final page of the spreadsheet, page 6, that is a provision that was present in the previous version of the tax bill. So with that, Madam Chair, it concludes the overview of the spreadsheet.
Thank you very much. We certainly will take a look at this. We do want to see the language of this bill, and we provided you with ours. We think that, you know, it's even trade here. So if you would do that, and once again, you know, we don't have the same understanding of what taxes we could raise, what we could not. And I see you have a June accelerated in here. That is a tax increase. And I'm going to be asking for clarification from the chief fiscal analyst, whether the agreement allows it. If it does, we will certainly have a proposal on that as well. We were told it would not be, certainly not going into the, we couldn't do it, period, because otherwise we would have perhaps had tax increases to within the 4-year period, but we were told we couldn't do that. And so I think we're going to need some clarification, but certainly want to see the language that goes with the spreadsheet. If we act as a conference committee, we have to not only adopt a spreadsheet, we have to adopt the language, subject to technical corrections and so forth. So I think we need to get some clarification from the leaders, and before we can move forward on the things in your spreadsheet, which are the money items. If you're interested, now that you have our language items, which are for the most part not money items, some minor ones with LGA penalty forgiveness and things like that. If you're interested in talking about the non-money items, fine, but I think the spreadsheet is not adequate. But then also, it does deal with money items, and I'm not ready to talk about that until we get that kind of clarification. And it would, make it easier for everybody if we were all on the same page. And it's clear to me that we're not with, and not the fault of the members of the House nor the members of the Senate. We just need clarification from the people that signed the agreement or accepted the agreement. We've just given you our language document. If you think you're interested in discussing that among yourselves and responding, that would be fine. We'll wait for that. If not, I don't see any particular way forward that just does anything other than an exchange of, in a sense, misunderstandings about what the agreement provides for. But I'm going to ask both Representative Davids and Representative Gomez until we get that clarification on the money stuff, is there, do you see anything further that we can do this evening? Representative Havens? Do you want time to discuss those things that we could agree to, or that are
I think,
language
Madam
things?
Chair,
or
I think
or
that'd be a
not?
good
I mean, it's
idea.
okay, either way.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be a good idea to give us a chance to discuss some of this and come back
That'd be
after
fine.
recess.
Okay,
Or I should let Chair go, yes.
so we took a little bit longer in writing up the language article, but it is 6 o'clock now. Can you be back by 7 to see if there's any of those things that you would agree to?
I think so, yeah.
Or sooner, but,
Madam Chair, I think that would be a good time.
okay. So we are in recess to the call of the chair, but approximately 7 o'clock.